Hey, this is Greg Kesich at the Portland Press Herald, and I'm here again with Bill Nemitz.
Good morning.
And we have a guest here at MTM World Headquarters out in South Portland, Roy Lenardson. And if that's not a name that you jumps to your recollection right away, it should, because Roy has been involved in Republican politics and campaigns for 30 years?
Yeah, it's getting up there now. I should say, I started off as an OPLA, Office of Policy and Legal Analysis staffer for 10 years.
Nonpartisan.
I worked in the State House. I staffed Legal and Veterans Affairs Committee of the Casino Committee. Yeah, I was the staffer in that committee back in the day.
And then you went to the Senate Republicans?
That's right, 3 years there as chief of staff.
And since then you've had a checkered career.
Just locking arms with Satan, moving down the path of Republican politics.
Right. So, Roy, when I first met you, I think people would describe Maine as a blue state. Democrats controlled the House. They shared control of the Senate. Angus King was governor, but most people thought of him as kind of a Democrat stand-in. And I don't think people would say that today. So, what's changed?
Well, and it's interesting. It's not just Maine. If you look at Appalachia, sort of Ohio, Pennsylvania, this sort of middle America, which Maine is really an integral part of that, has been undergoing this transformation, and you guys have reported on it for years. It's every time a mill closes, every time someone goes out of business, every time a kid doesn't stay in Maine and leaves the state, and so the families disappear. Schools closes. I'm a Catholic. I see our Catholic churches closing. You see this sort of disappearing Maine, if you will, and I think that jars folks and puts politics in a different perspective, so it doesn't become so much Democrat Republican anymore, but sort of survival politics. Who's talking to me in the right way? And so I think we saw that begin even before Paul LePage. I ran the Taxpayer Bill of Rights campaign, you guys may remember, back in 2006. And all it was an attempt to change the discussion. It's time to talk about government and what it's doing and what's happening in this state. And, a few folks got it. Do you guys remember who the chairman of the Tabor campaign was?
I'm thinking Mary Adams.
Paul LePage.
Paul LePage, really?
In 2006?
Yeah, back then. Yeah, he was our honorary chairman. Mary was obviously heavily involved. But so this discussion has gone on for over a decade of zeroing in on sort of what people now call the Trump voter, but that Maine voter, because we saw the first wave, like some of the Western Pennsylvania and Ohio all at the same time, that's sort of what's transformed. And what's interesting, when I worked in the legislature, there were some great sort of blue dog Democrats. Bill Diamond's still around, but this whole group of sort of conservative Democrats, moderate Republicans, they got along, they did the business. And what you just saw was the disappearance of the blue dog Democrat and sort of the rise of the progressive Democrats in the greater Portland area and a few cities, and they sort of fed each other with their success and became more successful, and the other folks just quietly went away, and then they've reappeared as Republicans.
But how deep-rooted Republicans are they? I mean, they're not the old loyal party line Republicans. It's you think structure now. I think
no problem. Just look at history. It's not rocket science. It's someone from the 2nd District, fairly moderate, business owner or comes from a business family, well known. There is a model that works there, and just this. I think part of the success of the Republican Party has been the failure of the progressives to recognize how alienating a force they truly are. I mean, it's actively alienates large parts of their party. I mean, when a guy like John, who's the guy that lost in Western Maine, the Milltown?
Yeah,
the
John
senator.
Patrick. John Patrick,
right.
A guy like John Patrick loses an incumbent, conservative Democrat, traditionally Labor Democrat, loses to Lisa Kime, who's obviously terrific, will do a great job, but you start losing those areas, and it's over in rural Maine, I think, for the Democrat Party. Now, there's some bright stars. I'm a huge Louis Lucchini fan down in Ellsworth. I'll do everything I can to get him and turn him see the light. But, but they're so far and few between, thank God.
Yeah.
Because if there were more, Adam Cody, another great example.
Well, I was going to bring him up as
Perfect
an example. Yeah.
Perfect.
Somebody that
great guy. I like him a lot.
is outside that wing of the Democratic Party that you described.
So this is a long way of describing the Republican Party by saying what it isn't. I don't mean to do that. But so what it is this disparate collection of souls that have decided that the Democratic Party no longer represents their core economic interests. And so that's the critical thing for me, is that are Republicans going to understand that this is an economic partnership?
Not an ideological one.
Not an ideological partnership. Right. Doesn't mean you can't keep your core ideologies, but don't lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, and I'm a Mainer, the mystique of the Maine worker, and it's true, by the way, I see it in Florida, I hire Maine people. When a Maine person walks through the door, you're going to get a hard worker. Everybody thinks that out when you leave the state, I mean, generally speaking. And so can the Republican Party capture that? Can they capture that mystique?
Well, the sort of traditional Republican economics has been tax cuts, pretty much as a solution to every problem, and smaller government as a result, and that is not necessarily what this kind of voter that you're talking about is really going to benefit from. Mm-hmm. So why are they gravitating to Republicans when under those circumstances, when the things that are going to help their lives are, health care, education, better infrastructure, and they're not in a high tax bracket?
Look, not to be too wonky here, but there's this Catholic social teaching called the concept of subsidiarity, right? Which is this notion that the closer a decision is made to your kitchen table, the better off we are as a society. Okay? Just think about that. I think when Republicans communicate, and if you've listened to the language, it has evolved where we want to give you more opportunities to control what's in your pocket, what's in your wallet. We want decisions to be made at the family. I mean, they have, and maybe it's too subtle and maybe, important people don't hear it, but out there, it's this notion of that pushing decisions down to the kitchen table. It's the same thing, right? We're cutting government, but now we're really trying to move decisions down to as close to the kitchen table as possible, and that whether it's your town government, the county government, not so much in Maine, but sort of each level up, and every time it gets further away from you, you are worse off. And honest to God, I mean, Washington, D.C. is literally feeding the flame and the fire of that notion, because we all assume that everybody understands the difference between United States Senator Susan Collins and your state rep. They absolutely do not. It's all the same.
They're right? All government.
They're government. And so a lot of what goes on, Greg, is the federal drive of misbehavior at the federal level, and it isn't one group or another. It's all, right, in people's minds. It feeds into this notion of, well, it's different at my state, and we can do better locally. We can make different decisions locally. And so I think when Republicans communicate that message, which is we want you to make more decisions at your kitchen table, and you stick with that, it's a good message.
So when the government doesn't deliver, Democrats look bad, and Republicans look good, because it proves their point, even when they're in charge of the government.
Let me give you a perfect example of the mishandling that Portland engaged in, and I say collectively, I'll include you guys as well, since I'm saying it to your face. Welfare reform, welfare generally. Everybody reacted. No such thing, doesn't happen, mean-spirited, went on that whole tirade, right?
Yeah.
Well,
you mean welfare?
I wrote like one of those a week. Yeah, so
go ahead. Welfare abuse or fraud?
Yeah, fraud,
okay,
not true, all fraud. But what
insignificant.
But what the Democrats failed to recognize, and I told this to Ethan and others, I said, you guys, I've seen it. I know what's coming. I know some of the stories that are coming out. This is not how you want to play this. What you want to play is you want to get in front of this and saying, listen, we built these programs. These programs are for the people that need it. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that every dollar that we spend in the programs we built and Republicans rejected gets to those people that you now say you're defending. They didn't do that. They fell right in for the trap. There's no such thing. You're mean-spirited. You just throw one thing out, and then another thing, and then the ARAMS market, and then another thing, and then another thing. And meanwhile, Democrats who built the programs now look like they're incompetent. But they can't even, when they built the program, all they need to do is,
Right.
yeah, we built it and we're ready to fix it. Here's how we do it.
Well, it also goes to the power of the narrative. I mean, if you can find one like the market, where that funny business is going on, you throw that out there, and that story becomes larger than life in a lot of people's minds because it reinforces a pre-existing assumption that they have that this stuff is rampant. So whether or not it's rampant is irrelevant. If you can successfully peddle that kind of story and it gets traction out there, then you're going to change the conversation.
My advice to Democrats, though, is change the way you talk about this issue and own what you built and insist on fixing it. Not because, Bill, there's more coming, one after the other. And you forget now, the Republicans control the levers of power. We have the ability to actually go look at the fraud. They've hired a full-time guy. I think he was a Westbrook chief of police, great guy. And it's endless what's going on and the fraud. It really is. And so, but it's just a good example of fumbling the narrative, right? And Democrats and of course even Republicans have never. We have the controls, the levers of power. We have the ability to control the narrative now. We have the ability to go do the investigations. We have the ability to do these things, and so they're going to have to switch how they talk and how they do business. And the progressive reaction, you can't go from the Starbucks on Exchange Street, and then there's a Starbucks up on Congress Street, and have that be your social circle and think you know what Maine people are thinking. That's my biggest complaint about the Democrat Party now. It's literally their world is between those two Starbucks, and those are the people they talk to, day in and day out. Now, not everybody. Louis Lucchini, Bill Diamond. There's a whole bunch of them out there. But I would ask you, are they on the inside?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you think that the power center for the Democratic Party still resides on the Portland Peninsula in Maine?
I'm running through my head instances where it doesn't.
Ben Shipman, Michael Sylvester. I mean, these aren't exactly the key power players in the party.
These aren't the Joe Brennans.
Right.
No.
I
think the residual. Remember, they're not really in control of anything anymore. They don't even really control the House.
Right.
They're barely in control of the House. They don't. No one
so that's
controls
my point.
the Senate.
My point is, where is the center of the Democratic Party right now? And it's hard to locate.
But that's the point, isn't it?
There's an assumption, right? There's an assumption.
We're winning because they're adrift at sea.
There's an assumption that it's always been and always will be Portland, but I'm not so convinced of that anymore. I don't know where you look right now to see where the critical mass is.
I mean, I guess that's what this primary is about. But I want to talk to you about Republicans.
Yes.
Okay. So in the Democrats, it's pretty clear to me, like to run statewide as a Democrat, you have to get like a good housekeeping seal of approval on
There's a big litmus test.
Abortion, equality, environmental policy. What are are there any corollaries for a Republican candidate?
Yeah, sure, of course. Tactically, to talk about Republicans, and the advice I give them that I ask is, do not fall into the abortion trap or the gay rights trap. They say, what bills would you like me to sign as governor? Put them in front of me. And I wish you guys could do that as well. So if someone says you're for the environment or you're environmentally, say, here's 5 bills. Would you sign these, yes or no? Here's 5 bills that protect the life of unborn children. Whether it's a 24-hour waiting period, medical, a doctor has to be on present. There's a lot of reasonable, for someone like me, pro-life Catholic, bills that are out there that I think should be the discussion, not our. And I say this to the Christian Civic League folks and others. Don't ask someone, are you going to overturn Roe v. Wade? It's a stupid question, first of all. You aren't. You can't, and it's not going to happen. But I would like, so for me, the litmus test for Republicans, I think, is evolving to, here's 3 bills, which ones would you sign? That's how I'm hoping this campaign goes, and I'm trying to do my best to sort of push that narrative. Ask about the bills you'd like to see, not about these weird D.C. Fed focus group, talking point, NRC, DSC crap that they force down Maine's people's throats. Doesn't matter. Do you want to stop global warming, yes or no? Okay, that's not the question. Here's 3 bills that would help protect the environment. Would you sign them, and why not? And then they hear them every session. Just go pull them out.
So, did you hear an answer there?
Huh?
Did you hear him answer that?
There isn't a litmus. There isn't.
There's a litmus test, but it's very it's very detailed.
Well, it's not going to be. We're trying to move away from. I guess that's the whole point. They don't work. They're devastating to the party. litmus test, as the Democrats can tell you.
Well, let me ask you this. So is not the Republican electorate, but the Republican Party regulars, the people that show up for primaries, are they more ideologically conservative than they were a generation ago?
I think so. I think generally speaking, there's more of a conservative ideology. I think what's interesting, though, that they also have figured out that, and I fought this battle for years, that perfect and really good are no longer enemies. And I think we're close to that point now where if you're pro-choice Republican and you can support some things around restricting abortion issues, okay. So it's this slowly changing of perfect and really good aren't enemies, and so the perfect people are destroy the party. And I don't see them having the success that they think that they're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
What about names? Susan Collins is going to announce by the end of this week, right, as to her intentions. Is it if she announces that she's in, is it over?
Oh God, no! Not in a Republican primary, not in the least. Anyone who's telling you that, like that narrative is complete crap. It's not true at all.
Now, this is from a guy who's working for Mary Mayhew.
Well,
right?
No, I would say that to Susan.
Right,
I would have no problem. I mean, I would.
Right.
I mean, if they have asked me, they listen. Maine has a very interesting tradition of how it treats its incumbents. Doesn't matter if it's, going back to the way Olympia Snow and sort of how she got out. That Mark Chase Smith. What happened with her and Bill Hathaway. So this notion of incumbents or appointed or the anointed doesn't do well with primary voters in either party.
Yeah, but when you have an approval rating north of 60%, you're starting off in a pretty good place. And
could you run a campaign where the whole focus was getting people who aren't regular primary voters to show up?
Of course. Absolutely. Get unenrolled folks to register as Republicans? Absolutely. That's what I would do. I'd run an aggressive voter registration drive. I'd focus on Scarborough, Wells, Kennebunk, Buxton, Gorham. Portland has plenty of unenrolled voters, frankly. It's a gold mine for someone like Senator Collins. Yeah. I would convert as much as possible. Kevin Ray did that a little bit when he ran the first time and he had a fairly crowded primary. They did a nice job of converting unenrolled voters and getting them and folks on, I think, in Washington County and a couple other spots. It was a deliberate effort to get more folks registered for the Republican primary. So I think it's out there. But to the Senator Collins thing, the noose of Washington around her neck is going to be heavy. At some point, you're going to have to ask the question, what are you doing? And we can say, oh, she's super nice. She works with everybody. She's cooperative. All true, by the way, completely true. But I just don't know if that plays in a Republican primary. Mm-hmm. I think she'd crush in a
So
general
look beyond
election.
the primary. Say a more pure conservative Republican wins the primary. Then we go to the question, and this is happening on the Democratic side as well. Do you choose a candidate who is most closely aligned with what you perceive your party principles to be, or do you elect someone in the primary who can win in the general? What's your prognostication on Susan Collins as a general election candidate?
Crushes it, wins governor for life.
Right.
Build a statue of the state house
more
right
term
away.
limits.
No, but it's a Republican primary.
Right.
That is the election. That is absolutely not a slam dunk.
No.
Not even close.
So if you were advising her, would you tell her to go independent?
Susan Collins is a loyal Republican. So was Olympia Snow. People who say that, that's
no,
ridiculous.
she really is, though. I mean,
Really
her loyalty runs very,
There's
very deep.
anyone who would question Susan Collins' loyalty to the Republican Party is insane. I get DC people call me all the time, like, are you crazy? I tell them who her parents were, where she's from, what she's done. And she has knocked on doors for me personally for candidates to go. She's given $5,000 checks to candidates. I mean, anybody who says that does not understand the loyalty gene, which I also possess. A lot of us have that. The old line Republicans, we're very loyal people. And I like to keep my mouth shut more than not on stuff because I have some things I'd like to say from time to time about people who we've elected who are in my party, but I don't. So,
well,
you're
see if we
among
can
friends,
open your
Roy.
mouth. Yeah, right.
it served me well for a long time. They still don't like me anyway, and I don't even care. That's the beauty of it.
Has Paula Page changed Republican politics in Maine? I mean, is this like an unusual personality that's going to come and go, or is something really shifted here?
Look, I think, yes, he has dramatically shifted the way the business gets done. For me, there's sort of a clarity of what he says. It's just nice just to say it. You don't have to agree with it, but geez, there it is. It makes life a lot easier. Should he say some things differently? Yeah, probably. I mean, I've been accused of no worse crime myself many times, so I understand that. Crime of being from Walterboro, just black and white. Everything's very black and white. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of gray spot when you grow up there. So I think he has dramatically changed things. I think for me, because I'm a tactician, the mechanical aspect of the party and of the things, having worked in OPLA and the machine of government, what he has done is incredible. If you look at things like the Maine State Housing Authority, the Finance Authority, the Maine Turnpike Authority, even some of the university systems, the Southern Maine College, the whole welfare system, how it gets done, how it operates, how the budget is done, the things that Richard Rosen was able to do. I mean, he has changed the machine of government across 30 or 40 years of Democrat rule dramatically. And, we don't even hear about these things, like the housing authority is running smoothly, the Turnpike Authority, Peter Mill's done a great job. So he, despite any criticisms you have, he is a manager on one level, and there's a lot of tactical things that have been fixed differently. We have surpluses, the budget is in good shape. You don't have to agree with all of these things, but on the mechanical side of things, it's fascinating to see all of the tweaks that have been done and the way things are sort of operating in budgets. And, I work for the legislature. Every year was another budget crisis, hundreds of millions of dollars. Literally, all they did was sit around and talk about what you're going to cut. And I was listening to some Republicans the other day complaining about something. And I thought, isn't it nice to complain about having money and what you're going to do with it? I mean, I don't even think people realize there's no money on the table. You have an opioid problem. You got to cut schools to fund. We don't even have those discussions anymore. Though, if you want some opioid money, you could take the $12 million from the harness racing gets every year and give it to them. If I could put that in.
What harness racing? What harness racing?
Two things I hate. Funding private industries drives me. Corporate welfare drives me crazy. And the other thing is all of these economic development. You guys are doing the Pine Tree, all that stuff. It's just insanity.
So, but aside from yes, he says some things that probably he shouldn't say, some rude things, but there's also a tone in terms of for him to get his policies that you described, in the best possible light, to get them through. He's got to vilify the opposition in a way that makes it really hard for anybody to work with him. And I think he's okay with that. I don't know him, but my guess is that he's fine with that. But is that a path going forward? Is that how are we going to have like bare knuckle politics in Maine?
Listen, there's not going to be another Paul LePage in our lifetime. It's just not going to happen. I mean, what a story, right?
Right.
Homeless at 11, 18 kids, didn't speak English, rose his way up through the ranks. You don't have to agree with everything he says, but it's an extraordinary Maine story. I've seen him speak now 3 or 4 times at different conferences around the country, and I forget the story, but when he tells that story to people, and it's a true story, it's shocking. I mean, people are just how is it even possible? Like, first of all, who speaks French? They didn't even know people in America spoke. You know what I mean? Just right. You're homeless, and so no, there's just not going to be another guy like that, and I don't think in our lifetime. I think we'll go back to a little bit of management, caretaking, ship sailing kind of politics for a little bit. I think people will want a little calmer in the storm.
Would Mary Mayhew be that kind of a governor? Because she's picked up in many respects where LePage has left off when it comes to kind of the red hot rhetoric and
I would say listen. I think Mary has the same passion and she will absolutely carry on some of the things that he's built. But I think the difference is she has a 7-second delay on her. So do you know what I mean? Which I think solves a lot of problems on that front. Literally. That stuff doesn't come out within that 7-second window, so you can save it. This doesn't happen. She's very meticulous, and obviously I support her, and I think she's great. But I'm not unhappy with lots of folks that are running. I'm a huge believer. Candidates hate it, but the more people in the primary, the better, because you work harder, and the best person wins. You can argue that all you want, but the best person running and people voting pick that person. I'm all for
among
it.
the people. Those
yeah,
people
among
voting.
those people.
But
And
in
so,
a primary like that, it really is a turnout.
Well,
it's a turnout.
change
question.
the definition of those people. Like
Right.
if Collins came and did the unenrolled.
Right. Or, Peter Mills thought he was going to win that primary on election day based on his models, and all of a sudden all these votes showed up,
Right.
and they weren't for him.
So that becomes organizational in terms of who
That's
can
right.
turn
Like
out,
there's three
you know,
groups in
right,
Maine you want
right.
to do business with
Right.
on the Republican Party. The Christian Civic League. It's Carol Conley, who's just a wonderful person. There's Bob Emmerich and sort of that, collection of folks. Then I call them my 100 miracle ladies. It's the women that run those Oxford County fairs. There's Becky Kendall out in Bethel and Barbara Robinson and those guys out there. There's 100 of them. And they are the backbone. It was Cora Brown here in Portland for years. You remember Cora? She was like 100, I think, when she died. But there's a bunch of those folks. And my advice to any candidate is, and I think Senator Collins does well with these women.
Who's the third group?
It's the affinity group. So it's talk to Dave Trahan at SAM, Sportsman Alliance. There's the gun owners folks, some of the Second Amendment people, the homeschool. So the third group is those affinity. I group them all
So
together.
where does a guy like Roger Cates fit into those? Is he in one of those groups, or is he irrelevant when it comes to political strategizing? The moderate Republican.
I think irrelevant's good for a primary.
Which speaks volumes about where the Republican Party is right now.
It's not a moderate.
There's no
Republicans
home
are not
for
moderate.
There's
There's
no home for a guy
moderates,
like
but it's
that.
not moderate.
Right.
Any more than the Democrat Party is moderate. It's not moderate. Neither of our parties are moderate.
Right.
That's why we have 40% of folks are unenrolled.
Right.
We have a big moderate party, and it's the unenrolled.
But what does that say about the whole process? And I agree with you. If neither party can nominate a moderate candidate, so that going into the general, we once again have not just polar opposites, but people that some might argue are coming from the two extremes. Where does that leave the general election voter?
See, I think Maine's great because we get independents all the time. Most states, like you have an independent governor or an independent senator. I mean, they can't believe that.
Oh, same guy.
Same guy. Yeah.
No, but I mean, or Jim Longley. I mean, we have
Right.
independents get elected to the legislature. I mean, that doesn't happen in other
Yeah.
states. Just does not happen. You think Massachusetts is going to do that anytime soon? Their straight party ticket voting strategies. No, I just think if you become irrelevant in the market, voters will find another path. At some point, and I love pointing this out because it bugs the crap out of Democrats, is when's the last time they won a statewide election?
I know.
When's the last time they won a statewide election with more than 50% of the vote? I think it was George Mitchell.
That's right.
That's a long time. That would require some soul searching.
Well, that's why when you look at someone like Cody, and I think one of the underlying strategies there is just to look out at Democrats in general and say, let's win one for a change. In other words, let's not nominate a candidate who is ideologically pure and everybody within the party loves him. How about you nominate somebody who can win in a general? And this applies to the Republicans as well.
So the Republicans have won a bunch of statewide races with people that you've said pretty much couldn't win a primary now. Susan Collins, you're saying it would have a real struggle. Wouldn't Olympia Snow have a struggle in
Absolutely.
a statewide primary, especially if she was an unknown?
Yeah.
Bill Cohen coming
But
out.
again, these are master politicians. They aren't just senators. Olympia Snow is
Right.
probably one of the most effective I've ever met. I mean, the
Yeah.
two of them they've knocked on every door on every main street of every business in the state of Maine. They literally, their whole lives are dedicated to this. So if, I believe that they could figure out a way to still win.
They're all pro-choice, right?
That's right.
They're all pretty moderate on other social issues. So anyway, it's Paula Page is really the only person I can think of who won statewide from the real hardcore, fire-breathing conservative wing of the party, right?
Yeah. Well, and lots of senators and legislators.
Right.
I mean, there's a pretty big conservative contingent in there.
It's in the House, especially, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a small group.
No.
So there's folks. Look, at the end of the day, who is speaking to the kitchen table issue? Who is talking to people about their checkbook? Is Susan Collins going to talk to people about their economic well-being? effectively, right? Because it's a very different shift from being a legislative person who talks and an executive person who does. Very different.
But if she talks to people about, for example, their health care, now that plays into their economic well-being. But what you're saying is that doesn't translate?
It's pretty far down the list.
Which is really ironic, because nothing is going to break some people quicker than
right. But for someone like me, I own a company, a business. I pay $1,400 a month for my health insurance and get no subsidy because I actually make a living and earn money. So I used to pay $436. Now I pay.
So what are you complaining about? Why are you so angry?
I'm just saying it's not fair that I pay $1,400. It's not.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah, but what are Republicans doing about that?
No, I'm not. I wasn't I wasn't here to solve problems. I was just here to point them out.
That's right. Thank you.
Like
Thank
you're
you.
just here to gain your pay.
here to complain.
Right. If my pay was contingent on solving anything,
Since you raised the issue, I'm paying too much.
No, I think Paul LePage talked to the voters about their economic well-being effectively. Maybe he did some things people like, but he was good at it. And I think at some point, a Democrat is going to have to be, and Susan Collins and others are going to have to talk to people like they're at their kitchen table and understand their wallet and the decisions that they make every day. And if you don't do that, you're not going to win. I think there is a shift. And, maybe I shouldn't introduce Catholic social teaching on subsidiarity, but that is literally what it is. It is pushing decisions down to the kitchen table.
All right. Well, I'm going to let that be the last word. Thanks a lot, Roy. This is always very informative and fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This is a Press Herald podcast. You can hear past episodes at pressherald.com/podcasts. You can subscribe on iTunes, on Android devices, and stream on Stitcher. Please email comments and questions to letterstotheeditor@pressherald.com. Thank you for listening.